In the vast darkness between stars, where silence reigns absolute and death comes without warning, there exists a truth that is held for 30 million years. Apex predators do not negotiate. They do not form alliances. They do not show mercy. The Kithra learned this truth the hard way when their entire civilization vanished in a single night, leaving behind only empty worlds and the faint echo of screams that traveled faster than light itself. The Zephyrians discovered it when their war fleets, each ship capable of cracking planets, were found drifting in space, crews reduced to ash that spelled out warnings in languages that shouldn't exist. For eons, the Vexi have ruled the galaxy not through conquest, but through the simple, terrifying fact that nothing else dared to challenge them. They are evolution's perfect mistake. Creatures born from a world where only the absolute strongest survived, where mercy was extinction and hesitation was death. They hunt not for territory or resources, but for the pure, primal joy of proving their supremacy over all other forms of life. Their ships are living nightmares that feed on fear itself. Their weapons don't just kill, they erase entire species from the quantum fabric of reality. When the Vexi arrive in a system, civilizations don't fight back. They don't negotiate. They simply disappear. But now, for the first time in 30 million years, something impossible has happened. A small, pale blue world at the edge of an unremarkable spiral arm has done the unthinkable. It has said no. The humans of Earth don't know. They've just challenged the galaxy's most perfect killers. They don't understand that their refusal to surrender has broken a cosmic law older than their sun. They have no idea that their simple act of defiance has sent shockwaves through civilizations that mastered faster-than-light travel when Earth's continents were still forming. What humanity doesn't realize is that sometimes the greatest predator isn't the one with the sharpest claws or the most powerful weapons. Sometimes it's the one crazy enough to bite back when everything in the universe tells it to lie down and die. The Vexi are about to learn something new about the nature of predation. And the galaxy, those few civilizations still brave enough to watch from the shadows, is about to witness the birth of something that will make the word humanity synonymous with the impossible. Because when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, the real question isn't which one breaks. It's what emerges from the collision. Admiral Sarachun had always believed that first contact would be different. Growing up reading science fiction novels and watching old Earth movies, she'd imagined dramatic meetings with wise alien ambassadors, careful diplomatic protocols, and the gradual building of interstellar relationships based on mutual respect and shared curiosity about the universe. She never expected it to begin with what could only be described as a cosmic eviction notice. The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, Earth Standard Time, transmitted on every frequency simultaneously, and somehow bypassing all of humanity's communication networks to appear directly on screens, tablets, phones, and even electronic billboards across the planet. It lasted exactly 17 seconds, but those 17 seconds would forever divide human history into before and after. The voice that spoke was unlike anything in human experience. It carried undertones that seemed to vibrate through bone and sinew, harmonics that suggested vast intelligence coupled with absolute certainty. When translated by Earth's most sophisticated AI systems, the message was brief and terrifying in its simplicity. Inferior species of the third planet, you have been selected for processing. Prepare for absorption into the collective glory of the Vexi Empire. Resistance will result in pain. Compliance will result in swift dissolution. You have 72 of your planetary rotations to prepare. This communication concludes. The aftermath was predictably chaotic. Stock markets crashed, governments held emergency sessions, and religious leaders proclaimed everything from the end times to humanity's ascension to a higher plane of existence. But while the world convulsed in panic and denial, Admiral Chun found herself strangely calm in the war room deep beneath NORAD, surrounded by the best military minds Earth had ever produced. General Marcus Rodriguez, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, broke the heavy silence that had settled over the assembled officers. Options, people. What are we dealing with? Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the physicist, not the politician, as she constantly reminded people, pulled up holographic displays showing the message's technical analysis. The transmission method alone defies our understanding of physics. They somehow synchronized the signal across the entire electromagnetic spectrum, transmitted it faster than light, and made it appear on devices that weren't even connected to networks. We're dealing with technology that's centuries, possibly millennia, ahead of ours. Overwhelming technological superiority, muttered Colonel James Park, the head of military intelligence. Classic invasion scenario. Establish dominance through demonstration of power, demand surrender, minimize resistance by showing futility of fighting back. Admiral Chen studied the data scrolling across her screens. Satellite networks were picking up gravitational anomalies at the edge of the solar system. Something massive was coming, moving faster than anything humanity had ever detected. How massive are we talking about, Dr. Warren? The physicist's face was pale. The gravitational displacement suggests objects the size of small moons. Multiple objects, and they're accelerating in ways that should be impossible. Recommendations? General Rodriguez asked. The room fell silent. What could Earth possibly do against technology that treated the laws of physics as suggestions? Their most advanced spacecraft could barely reach Mars, while the enemy was apparently capable of faster-than-light travel and gravitational manipulation. Admiral Chen stood, walking to the massive display showing Earth from orbit, beautiful, blue, and suddenly very fragile. We're thinking about this wrong, she said quietly. Admiral, General Rodriguez prompted. We're assuming we have to match their technology. We're thinking like prey. She turned back to face the room. What if we think like humans instead? Colonel Park leaned forward. Explain. Every species that's ever tried to conquer Earth has made the same mistake. They focus on our weaknesses, our primitive technology, our divided governments, our tendency toward conflict. But they miss what makes us dangerous. Chen walked back to the table, her voice gaining strength. We're the species that looked at mastodons and said dinner. We're the ones who saw the ocean and built ships. When faced with impossible odds, we don't surrender. We innovate. Dr. Warren shook her head. Sarah, I appreciate the sentiment, but this isn't about courage or innovation. These beings can manipulate gravity itself. They travel between stars. What can we possibly do that would matter to them? Admiral Chun pulled up Earth's defense networks on the display. They gave us 72 hours. What? Standard invasion protocol? Suggested General Rodriguez. No. Chen's eyes were bright with something between inspiration and madness. They want us to prepare. Think about it. If you can travel faster than light and manipulate gravity, why warn your target? Why give them time to prepare? Unless what? Colonel Park demanded. Unless they're not here to conquer us. They're here to hunt us. The room went dead silent. Dr. Warren was the first to speak. You think this is some kind of game to them? Look at the language again, Chen said, pulling up the translation. They didn't say surrender or submit. They said prepare for processing and absorption. They're not trying to rule us. They're trying to consume us. But they want us to put up a fight first. General Rodriguez's jaw tightened. Sport hunting. They're giving us time to become better prey. Which means, Admiral Chun continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was suggesting. They expect us to fight back. They want us to fight back. The question is, are we going to give them the kind of fight they're expecting, or are we going to show them what humans do when we're desperate? Colonel Park pulled up global military assets. Even if you're right, what can we do? Our most advanced weapons are nuclear missiles and railguns. Against technology that can manipulate gravity, we don't fight their technology, Chen said. We fight them. Over the next 6 hours, as reports continued to flood in about the approaching alien fleet, Admiral Chen outlined what would later be called the Terran Response Protocol. It was desperate, insane, and based on a fundamental gamble about human nature versus alien psychology. The plan began with a simple premise. If the Vexi were truly apex predators, they would expect their prey to behave like prey. They would expect fear, panic, desperate attempts to hide or flee, and ultimately, submission in the face of overwhelming power. So we give them the opposite, Chen explained to the assembled world leaders in an emergency UN session. We don't hide. We don't run. We don't submit. We do the one thing apex predators never expect from their food. The president of Brazil leaned forward, which is, we hunt them back. The next 66 hours were a frenzy of activity unlike anything in human history. Every military installation on Earth was retasked. Every scientist, engineer, and technician was recruited. Emergency protocols activated systems that most people didn't even know existed. But the most important part of the plan wasn't technological. It was psychological. Admiral Chun stood in the Global Communications Center as the final preparations were completed. In 18 hours, the alien fleet would arrive in Earth orbit. Across the planet, every human being who could hold a weapon was being armed. Not with the expectation that rifles and pistols could harm beings who could manipulate gravity, but because armed prey behaved differently than unarmed prey. Admiral, Dr. Warren approached, her arms full of data tablets. The gravitational readings are increasing. Whatever they're bringing, it's bigger than we thought. How much bigger? We're reading gravitational displacement equivalent to objects massing approximately the same as Earth's moon. 4 of them. Admiral Chin nodded calmly. Good, good. Dr. Warren stared at her. Sarah, they're bringing moon-sized ships. How is that good? Because, Chin replied, pulling up the global communication system, the bigger they are, the more they'll underestimate us. And we're about to teach them that the most dangerous predator isn't necessarily the biggest one. She opened the channel that would broadcast to every human on Earth and to the approaching alien fleet. Citizens of Earth, this is Admiral Sarah Chun, speaking for the unified military command of our planet. In 16 hours, we will face beings who consider themselves our superiors in every way. They possess technology we can barely comprehend. They command power that dwarfs our greatest weapons. They have traveled across the galaxy to claim our world and process our species. They have made one critical error. They have mistaken us for prey. To the Vexi fleet approaching our system, you offered us the choice between pain and swift dissolution. We choose neither. We choose to show you why every successful predator in this galaxy has learned to give humanity a wide berth. You want to hunt us? You want to process us? You want to absorb us into your empire? Come and try. But understand this, you are no longer the hunters. From the moment you entered our system, you became the hunted. Every human on this planet is now a weapon pointed at your heart. Every ship, every missile, every bullet is aimed at proving that humanity doesn't kneel. You think you're apex predators? You're about to learn what apex predators do when something tries to eat them. Welcome to Earth. Try not to bleed on the carpet. The transmission ended. Across the planet, 4 billion humans armed themselves and waited. In the depths of space, 4 moon-sized ships continued their approach, their crews utterly unprepared for what they were about to encounter. The hunt was about to begin. But for the first time in 30 million years, the Vexi weren't sure who was hunting whom. High Commander Zexthala had lived for 8,000 years, long enough to witness the absorption of 437 species across the galaxy. Each conquest followed the same predictable pattern. Initial terror upon receiving the processing announcement, frantic attempts at evacuation or defense, brief and futile resistance, and, finally, the sweet moment of species-wide submission when the prey finally understood their place in the cosmic order. The approach to Earth's solar system should have been no different. The third planet showed all the standard signs of a primitive civilization: electromagnetic radiation from crude communication systems, chemical propulsion spacecraft that barely left their planetary gravity well, and energy signatures consistent with late-stage industrial development. By Vexi standards, humanity was perhaps a century away from achieving true spaceflight capability. What made them interesting wasn't their technology, which was laughably primitive. It was their biology. The Vexi had been monitoring human development for several thousand of their rotations, watching with growing fascination as this bipedal species demonstrated behavioral patterns unlike anything in the galactic database. Humans were simultaneously cooperative and competitive, logical and emotional, capable of incredible altruism and shocking violence, often within the same individual. Most intriguingly, they appear to be persistence hunters that had evolved to become apex predators despite lacking the physical advantages typical of dominant species. No claws, no natural weapons, no enhanced senses. Instead, they possess something far more dangerous: unpredictability combined with tool use and social cooperation. Status report. Zexthala commanded as the Harvester fleet emerged from quantum folding at the edge of the Sol system. Subcommander Krixmora approached with a ritual submission posture. Fleet deployment successful. High Commander. All 4 Harvest vessels have achieved stable orbit around the planet. Gravitational manipulation systems are online. Processing arrays are warming up. Resistance level unprecedented. High Commander. Zexthala's sensory stalks sharpened with interest. Explain. The massive display screens surrounding the command nexus lit up with tactical information. Instead of the usual patterns of fleeing civilians and scattered military response, Earth showed something Krixmora had never seen in his 3,000 years of conquest. They appear to be converging, Krixmora said, his translator struggling with concepts outside standard Vexi experience. Instead of dispersing to minimize casualties, the human populations are gathering into defensive formations. They're moving toward our ships rather than away from them. Zexthala studied the data streams with growing fascination. Across Earth's surface, millions of humans were indeed doing the impossible, organizing coordinated responses to an overwhelmingly superior force. Military units from different nations were combining their resources. Civilian populations were arming themselves and taking positions in urban environments that would make orbital bombardment difficult without destroying the infrastructure the Vexi intended to preserve. Most curious, Zexthala mused. Show me their communication intercepts. The translation systems have been working around the clock to decode human languages, and the results were equally unprecedented. Instead of the usual pleas for mercy, negotiations for favorable surrender terms, or prayers to various deities, human communications were filled with tactical planning, resource allocation, and what could only be described as expressions of eager anticipation for the coming battle. High Commander, Krixmora's voice carried undertones of confusion. They appeared to be excited. One intercept particularly caught Zexthala's attention. It was from a human military facility buried deep underground, emanating from the continent they called North America. Final systems check people. Quantum entanglement communications are stable across all nodes. Project Lazarus is green across the board. All hunter-killer teams are in position. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to field test technology that shouldn't exist for another 100 years. The translation continued with what appeared to be a human female giving operational updates. Stealth penetration teams Alpha through Omega are ready for deployment. Molecular disassembly charges are armed and targeted. Nanoscale infiltration packages have been released into Earth's upper atmosphere. Biological warfare protocols are active. Zexthala's attack tendrils twitched with something approaching alarm. Krixmora, analysis. Are these transmissions accurate? High Commander, we've been monitoring their technological development. They shouldn't possess quantum entanglement communication. They shouldn't have molecular disassembly technology. They certainly shouldn't have nanoscale warfare capabilities. Yet they do. It appears so, High Commander. Furthermore, we're detecting energy signatures consistent with gravitational manipulation from their planet's surface. For the first time in 8,000 years, High Commander Zexthala felt something resembling uncertainty. The Vexi had conquered species far more advanced than what Earth had displayed. Some had possessed technology nearly equal to their own, but none had ever shown such a dramatic technological leap in the brief time between first contact and invasion. Open communication channels with the planet, Zexthala commanded. The response came immediately, appearing on screens throughout the Harvest fleet simultaneously. It was the same human female who had delivered their initial response to the processing announcement, but now she appeared calm and composed in a way that triggered deep warning instincts in every Vexhai who witnessed the transmission. High Commander Zexthala of the Vexhai Empire, Admiral Chen said, somehow knowing his identity despite this being their first direct contact. Thank you for coming so far to visit us. We've prepared quite a welcome. The fact that she knew his name was disturbing enough. The fact that her tone suggested she was looking forward to their meeting was genuinely unsettling. Human female, Zexthala replied through the translation matrix. You speak as though you possess some advantage over the Harvester fleet. This is impossible. Your species has been monitored for millennia. Your technological capabilities are well documented. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes reminded Zexthala uncomfortably of his own reflection during a particularly satisfying hunt. You've been watching us for millennia, have you? How wonderful. That means you've seen what we do to species that try to eat us. Tell me, High Commander, in all your observations of humanity, did you ever notice what happens to our predators? Your predators are extinct, Krixmora interjected before Zexthala could respond. Exactly, Admiral Chen smiled, and that smile sent alarm signals cascading through every Vexhai neural network that witnessed it. We ate them first. The transmission continued with technical data that caused growing agitation throughout the fleet command structure. Now, since you're new to this solar system, let me bring you up to speed on some recent developments. About 70 hours ago, when you announced your intention to process our species, humanity made a collective decision to accelerate our technological development by about 2 centuries. We've been holding back some of our more interesting research projects. Didn't want to attract the wrong kind of attention, you understand, but your visit has given us the perfect opportunity for field testing. Display screens throughout the Harvest fleet began lighting up with targeting alerts as objects launched from Earth's surface, moving far faster than human technology should have allowed. For instance, Admiral Chun continued conversationally, we've been working on miniaturized antimatter containment for about 40 years now. Turns out it makes excellent ammunition for railguns when you need to punch through gravitational shielding. The first salvo struck Harvest Vessel 3 with kinetic force equivalent to a medium-yield stellar event. The ship's living hull screamed across multiple dimensions as molecular bonds dissolved under the assault. We've also made some interesting breakthroughs in quantum mechanics. Admiral Chen's voice continued as Harvest Vessel 3's entire starboard section simply ceased to exist. Turns out your ships are particularly vulnerable to quantum decoherence weapons. Who knew? Zexthala's command nexus erupted in chaos as his officers tried to process what they were witnessing. The humans had just demonstrated weapons technology that rivaled their own, deployed from a planet that should have been centuries away from achieving spaceflight. Ow! Zexthala demanded. Oh, that's the beautiful thing about being a hunter species, Admiral Chen replied. We're really good at learning from our prey. Every species you've conquered, every piece of their technology, every tactical innovation, it's all been broadcast across space in your victory transmissions for the last 30,000 years. We've been listening, High Commander. We've been learning, and we've been preparing. The tactical displays showed something impossible. Earth's defense systems were tracking and targeting every ship in the Harvest fleet simultaneously, using technology that incorporated elements from dozens of conquered civilizations. You see, when you're a persistence hunter, the key isn't being the strongest or the fastest. The key is being more adaptable than your prey. And your prey, High Commander, included some very interesting species. The Kithra had fascinating insights into dimensional folding. The Zephyrians developed remarkable energy distribution systems. The Nexari created some truly inspired biotechnology. As if summoned by her words, new contacts appeared on the fleet's sensors. Ships launching from Earth that seemed to incorporate design elements from every major species the Vexhai had ever conquered. We've had 30,000 years to study your methods, your technology, your weaknesses. Every species you absorbed taught us something new about how to kill you. And now, High Commander, class is in session. The second wave of human attacks struck all 4 harvest vessels simultaneously. These weren't kinetic weapons, but something far more insidious. Nanoscale constructs that began dismantling the ship's living hulls at the molecular level while simultaneously interfacing with their quantum control systems. Impossible! Krixmora gasped as his console began displaying system failures cascading throughout the fleet. They cannot have mastered nanotechnology to this degree. Admiral Chen's image continued speaking as if she could hear him. You're wondering how we developed this technology so quickly. The answer is simple. We didn't develop it. We stole it. From you. The truth hit Zexthala like a quantum torpedo to the brainstem. The monitoring signals. Every sensor sweep you've conducted of our planet for the last century has been intercepted, analyzed, and reverse-engineered. Every quantum communication your ships sent to coordinate this invasion has been decoded and used to map your fleet's vulnerabilities. You've been teaching us how to kill you for decades, High Commander. We've just been polite enough to wait until now to show you what we learned. Harvest Vessel 2 reported catastrophic hull breaches as swarms of human spacecraft, impossibly advanced and armed with weapons that incorporated the best technology from dozens of extinct civilizations, began their assault. But these weren't random attacks. Every strike was precisely calculated to cause maximum psychological as well as physical damage. You came here to hunt us, Admiral Chun continued, her voice carrying across space with crystalline clarity. But here's the thing about humans, High Commander, we don't just hunt our predators. We become them. We take their strengths, learn their methods, and then we become better at being them than they ever were. The display screens showed human soldiers materializing inside the harvest vessels, somehow having bypassed every security system the Vexhai possessed. But these weren't ordinary soldiers. They moved with precision that suggested enhanced reflexes, carried weapons that seemed to bend space-time itself, and demonstrated tactical awareness that rivaled the Vexhai's own enhanced cognitive capabilities. Welcome to Earth, High Commander, Admiral Chun said as the first human boarding parties began their systematic takeover of the Harvest Fleet's most critical systems. Population, one apex predator species that just figured out it's not alone at the top of the food chain. For the first time in 30 million years, the Vexhai Empire was face-to-face with something they had never encountered, prey that had evolved into something more dangerous than its predators. The hunt had indeed begun, but the humans were right about one thing. The Vexhai were no longer the hunters. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos had never expected her first alien contact to involve rappelling through a dimensional breach into a living spaceship while carrying enough explosive nanites to sterilize a small moon. Then, again, the last 72 hours have been full of surprises. The interior of Harvest Vessel 1 defied human understanding of architecture. Walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to respond to the emotions of the creatures within. Corridors twisted through impossible geometries that made her enhanced spatial processors issue warning alerts about non-Euclidean mathematics. The air itself seemed alive, thick with microscopic organisms that her suit's sensors couldn't identify. Alpha Team, report. Her comm implant crackled with Admiral Chen's voice, transmitted through quantum entanglement from Earth's command center. We're inside the primary vessel, Santos whispered, her enhanced vocal cords automatically adjusting to frequencies that wouldn't resonate with the ship's living walls. Whatever these things are made of, they're not just advanced technology. They're evolved for this. Through her neural interface, she could see the tactical displays from all 12 boarding teams simultaneously. Humans had infiltrated every major system on all 4 harvest vessels, moving through the ships with a combination of stolen Vexhai, cloaking technology, and good old-fashioned stealth training. The most unsettling part wasn't the alien environment. It was how familiar some of it felt. Admiral, Santos continued, pressing herself against a wall that felt uncomfortably warm and yielded slightly to her touch. We're seeing architectural elements that match the databases we recovered from the Kithara ruins. These ships aren't just using conquered technology, they're using conquered biology. The implications were staggering. The Vexi hadn't simply destroyed the civilizations they conquered. They had absorbed them, incorporating their biological and technological innovations into their own systems. The ships hunting humanity were literally built from the corpses of hundreds of extinct species. Understood, Lieutenant Commander. Proceed with Phase 2. Santos moved deeper into the ship, following corridors that seemed to anticipate her presence. Her enhanced reflexes, courtesy of the crashed genetic modification program that had been implemented across Earth's military in the last 60 hours, allowed her to navigate spaces that shifted and flowed around her. The technology humanity had deployed against the Vexi was impossible by any conventional measure. Quantum entanglement communications that had taken decades to develop in secret laboratories. Nanoscale weapons that incorporated discoveries from crashed alien probes that governments had been studying since the 1940s. Genetic enhancement protocols based on DNA analysis of every alien biological sample Earth had ever acquired. But the most impossible thing was how quickly it had all come together. "Contact ahead," whispered Sergeant Shun, no relation to the Admiral, despite sharing the surname that had become synonymous with humanity's defiance. His enhanced vision systems highlighted 3 Vexi warriors moving through the corridor ahead, their forms barely visible even to augmented human senses. Santos studied the enemy through her tactical interface. The Vexi were terrifyingly beautiful in their alienness, tall, graceful beings with sensory stalks that constantly moved to assess their environment, limbs that could extend and contract at will, and skin that shifted color and texture to match their surroundings. They were also completely unprepared for what humans had become in 72 hours. Engagé Santos subvocalized. The human assault was over before the Vexi could react. Enhanced reflexes allowed the boarding team to move faster than alien nervous systems could process. Weapons that fired bullets made of crystallized space-time punched through armor that had never been penetrated. And, most importantly, the humans fought with a coordinated precision that suggested they had been training for this exact scenario their entire lives. Which, in a sense, they had been. Another section secured, Santos reported as her team moved toward the ship's control nexus. "Admiral, these weapons systems we're carrying, where do they really come from?" There was a long pause before Admiral Chin responded. "Lieutenant Commander, what I'm about to tell you is classified at levels that didn't exist until yesterday. The technology you're carrying represents approximately 200 years of accelerated research and development conducted in secret facilities that most world governments didn't know existed. Santos planted a quantum beacon that would allow for instantaneous communication with Earth regardless of distance or interference. 200 years in 72 hours. The research has been ongoing since 1947, when we recovered our first intact alien technology. Every crashed probe, every piece of debris from deep space, every anomalous energy reading. It's all been collected, analyzed, and reverse-engineered by an international consortium that's been preparing for this day since before your grandparents were born. The revelation hit Santos like a physical blow. Humanity had been preparing for alien invasion for nearly a century, developing countermeasures and weapons in complete secrecy while maintaining the facade of a primitive species barely capable of reaching their own moon. The space program was cover, she realized. Partially. We needed legitimate space technology to explain some of our capabilities. But our real space program has been operating from facilities that don't appear on any map, using technology that makes our public achievements look like stone tools. Santos reached the control nexus of Harvest Vessel 1, just as similar reports came in from the other 3 ships. The Vexi command centers were unlike anything in human experience. Vast organic chambers where dozens of aliens interfaced directly with their ships' living systems through neural connections that seemed to merge consciousness with technology. High Commander Zexthala turned to face her as she entered, his sensory stalks focusing on her with what might have been respect. "Human warrior," he said through translation systems that converted his thoughts directly into English. "Your species has surprised the HFY Empire. This has not happened in 30 million years." Santos kept her weapon trained on him, while her enhanced cognitive processors analyzed the chamber's layout, identifying targets, escape routes, and tactical opportunities faster than baseline human consciousness could have managed. "We're full of surprises," she replied. "For instance, did you know that your neural interface technology is based on innovations originally developed by the Nexary? We recovered some intact Nexary biotechnology from a probe that crashed in the Pacific Ocean in 1963. Took us 60 years to figure out how it worked." Zexthala's form shifted, colors flowing across his skin in patterns that Santos's cultural analysis software identified as expressions of shock and growing alarm. "You have Nexary technology?" "We have everyone's technology, High Commander. Every species you've conquered, every innovation you've absorbed, every tactical advantage you've gained. We've been collecting it all. The difference is, we've had time to improve on it." Through her neural link, Santos could see the broader tactical picture. Human forces weren't just boarding the HFY ships. They were systematically taking control of every major system. More importantly, they were doing it using technology that combined the best innovations from dozens of extinct civilizations. "You see," Santos continued, moving closer to the command nexus while keeping her weapons trained on the increasingly agitated HFY officers, "you made a critical error in your conquest strategy. You broadcast your victories. Every time you absorbed a new species, you sent their achievements across space as a demonstration of your power." She gestured to the organic control systems surrounding them. "Those broadcasts reached Earth. We've been listening for a very long time, cataloging every piece of technology you've stolen, every tactical innovation you've absorbed, every biological advantage you've gained from conquest." The tactical displays throughout the chamber began showing something that caused visible distress among the HFY command crew. Human ships were launching from Earth in numbers that should have been impossible for a species that had supposedly just achieved crewed spaceflight. "The fleet you're seeing isn't humanity's entire space program," Santos explained as hundreds of human vessels appeared on screens throughout the command nexus. "It's just the part we kept hidden. We've been building this fleet for 70 years, using technology reverse-engineered from every alien artifact we've ever recovered." High Commander Zexthala's sensory stalks drooped in what Santos recognized as an expression of profound defeat. "You have been preparing for our arrival. We've been preparing for exactly this scenario since we first detected your empire's expansion patterns. Every conquest you made brought you closer to Earth. Every species you absorbed taught us something new about your capabilities and limitations. And every victory broadcast you sent gave us more intelligence about how to defeat you." The chamber shook as human vessels began systematically disabling the Harvest Fleet's primary weapon systems. But these weren't crude, kinetic strikes. They were precision attacks that targeted specific vulnerabilities in HFY technology, delivered with surgical accuracy that suggested detailed knowledge of every system the aliens possessed. "Your mistake, High Commander, was assuming that a species capable of becoming apex predators on a world as dangerous as Earth would remain helpless when faced with an external threat. You assumed we would behave like prey, because that's how every other species has behaved when confronted with your empire." Santos activated the quantum beacon she had planted, sending a signal that would allow human technicians on Earth to interface directly with the Harvest vessel's control systems. "But we're not prey, High Commander. We never were. We're persistence hunters who spent 200,000 years becoming the most dangerous predators our planet has ever produced. And for the last century, we've been learning how to become the most dangerous predators in the galaxy." The organic walls around them began to pulse with new patterns as human technicians on Earth started taking control of the ship's systems remotely, using interfaces that incorporated technology stolen from the HFY themselves. "Welcome to Earth, High Commander Zexthala. You came here to hunt humanity. Instead, you've just become the next extinct species whose technology will help us hunt whatever comes next." Through the chamber's displays, Zexthala watched as his supposedly invincible harvest fleet was systematically captured by beings he had assumed were primitive prey animals. For the first time in 8,000 years of conquest, the High Commander of the Vexhai Empire understood what it felt like to be hunted by something more dangerous than himself. The age of Vexhai dominance was ending. The age of human expansion was about to begin. 6 months after what historians would later call the 72-Hour War, Dr. Elizabeth Warren stood in what had once been High Commander Zexthala's personal chambers aboard Harvest Vessel 1. The organic walls still pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, but now those patterns responded to human neural interfaces rather than Vexhai consciousness. The transformation of the captured fleet had been remarkable to witness. Human engineers, working with technology that combined innovations from dozens of extinct civilizations, had converted the living ships into something entirely new, vessels that retained their biological advantages while incorporating human improvements and tactical innovations. Status report, Dr. Warren. Admiral Chin's voice came through the quantum communication system, transmitted instantaneously from Earth despite the fleet's current position near the edge of the Andromeda Galaxy. The integration is proceeding ahead of schedule, Warren replied, reviewing data streams that flowed directly into her consciousness through neural interfaces based on Nexury biotechnology. The Vexhai organic systems are adapting to human control better than we anticipated. It's almost as if they were designed to be modular, which Warren was beginning to suspect they had been. The deeper humanity delved into Vexhai technology, the more evidence they found that the alien empire had been built on a foundation of systematic technological theft that spanned millions of years. Every major system aboard the harvest vessels incorporated elements from conquered civilizations, cobbled together into a technological chimera that was impressive in scope, but ultimately vulnerable to anyone who understood its component parts. And humanity, thanks to a century of covert research and the comprehensive database of alien technologies they had compiled, understood those components better than the Vexhai themselves. "What about our guests?" Admiral Chin asked. Warren glanced through the transparent aluminum barrier that separated her laboratory from the containment area where the surviving Vexhai crew members were housed. The aliens had adapted to captivity with surprising grace, though she suspected their compliance had more to do with shock than acceptance. "High Commander Zexthala has been remarkably cooperative," she replied. "His species appears to have a deep-seated respect for superior predators. Once they understood that humanity had effectively out-evolved them, they seemed to accept their new position in the food chain. It was a fascinating psychological dynamic. The Vexhai had spent millions of years at the apex of galactic civilization, secure in their belief that they represented evolution's ultimate achievement. Discovering that they had been surpassed by what they had considered primitive prey had shattered their worldview so completely that most of them had simply shut down, entering a state that human psychologists were calling predatory displacement syndrome. Any resistance to the integration protocols? None whatsoever. If anything, they seem eager to help us understand their technology. I think they're hoping that by making themselves useful, they can earn a place in whatever civilization we're building." Through the barrier, Warren could see Zexthala working alongside human technicians, his vast knowledge of conquered civilizations proving invaluable in humanity's rapid technological advancement. The former High Commander had adapted to his new role with the same efficiency he had once applied to conquest, apparently finding purpose in serving the species that had defeated him. Dr. Warren came another voice through the comm system, Dr. Sarah Kim from the Xenoarchaeology Division. "We've finished analyzing the database from Harvest Vessel 3. You need to see this." The data Kim transmitted caused Warren's enhanced neural processors to issue warning alerts. The Vexhai database contained detailed information about every species their empire had encountered over 30 million years of expansion. Most of those species were extinct, absorbed into the Vexhai collective. But some are not. "Admiral," Warren said, her voice tight with implications she was still processing, "we have a problem. According to this database, the Vexhai Empire wasn't the apex predator species in this galaxy. They were middle management." The silence on the communication channel stretched for several seconds before Admiral Chin responded. "Explain." Warren called up holographic displays showing the galactic map contained in the VexHigh database. It revealed a picture of the Milky Way that was radically different from humanity's understanding. Large sections of the galaxy were marked with symbols that translated to concepts like Forbidden Zone and Elder Territory. The VexHigh controlled perhaps 20% of the galaxy, Warren continued. The rest is claimed by entities that make the VexHigh look like house pets. There are at least 7 distinct apex predator species out there, each controlling territories larger than the entire VexHigh empire. Admiral Chen's voice carried undertones of the same grim calculation that had characterized her response to the initial VexHigh threat. What do we know about them? Very little. The VexHigh data suggests these species are so far beyond normal technological development that they exist in states of being that don't translate well into any language. But there's something else, Admiral. Something more immediately concerning. Warren pulled up communication intercepts from the VexHigh database. Messages that have been transmitted across the galaxy in the days following humanity's capture of the Harvest Fleet. News of our victory has spread. Every major power in the galaxy now knows that the VexHigh Empire has been defeated by a previously unknown species from an insignificant backwater system. We've gotten their attention, Admiral. All of their attention. The intercepted communications painted a picture of a galaxy in upheaval. The VexHigh had served as a buffer zone between the truly dangerous apex predator species and the younger civilizations still developing in the galaxy's outer regions. With that buffer gone, those ancient powers were beginning to take interest in the species that had eliminated their former neighbors. Recommendations? Admiral Chen asked. We accelerate the expansion program, Warren replied without hesitation. The technology we've acquired from a VexHigh gives us capabilities roughly equivalent to a mid-level galactic civilization. But that's not going to be enough when we encounter species that have been perfecting their predatory techniques for hundreds of millions of years. Through her neural interface, Warren accessed the tactical analysis that human strategists had been developing since the capture of the Harvest Fleet. The plan was audacious even by recent human standards. Use the VexHigh fleet as the foundation for rapid expansion across the galaxy, systematically conquering or absorbing every civilization they encountered until humanity possessed enough combined technology and resources to face the elder predators. We're talking about conquering the galaxy, Dr. Warren. We're talking about survival, Admiral. The VexHigh database is very clear about what happens to species that draw the attention of the elder powers without being strong enough to defend themselves. They don't get conquered. They get erased. Completely. As if they never existed. Warren pulled up historical records from the database, showing the fate of civilizations that had attracted unwanted attention from the galaxy's true apex predators. The pattern was consistent and terrifying. Entire species simply vanished from the galactic record, leaving behind no trace of their existence except empty worlds and the faintest quantum echoes in space-time itself. How long do we have? Unknown. The elder species operate on timescales that make geological epochs look brief. They might move against us tomorrow, or they might wait 10,000 years. But based on the communication patterns we're intercepting, something is stirring out there. Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment before responding. Dr. Warren, I want you to work with the VexHigh to identify the most advanced civilizations within our expansion range. We're going to need allies, and we're going to need them fast. Allies or conquests. Whatever it takes to ensure humanity's survival. The age of being a single-planet species is over. If we're going to face predators that can erase civilizations from existence itself, we need to become something more than human. Warren looked through the barrier at Zexthala, who was carefully instructing a human engineer in the use of quantum manipulation tools. The former apex predator had adapted to his new circumstances with remarkable flexibility, apparently finding satisfaction in serving the species that had out-evolved his own. It was a preview of humanity's future strategy. Every species they encountered would face the same choice. Join the expanding human collective voluntarily, or be absorbed into it by force. The technology existed to make both options viable, Thanks to the biological integration systems, the Vexhai had perfected over millions of years of conquest. Admiral Warren said, accessing databases that contain the locations and capabilities of every known civilization within 1,000 light-years of Earth. I'm transmitting target lists for the first wave of expansion. Based on Vexhai intelligence, we can probably absorb 12 to 15 species before the Elder Powers decide we're a significant enough threat to warrant their attention. And then, Warren looked out through the chamber's transparent walls at the stars of the Andromeda Galaxy, each point of light representing billions of worlds that might harbor civilizations humanity would need to conquer or ally with in order to survive what was coming. Then, we find out whether persistence hunting works on a galactic scale, she replied. The Vexhai thought they were apex predators until they met us. The elder species think they're apex predators because they've never encountered anything like humanity. We're about to test the hypothesis that any predator, no matter how advanced, can be out-evolved by something desperate and adaptable enough. Through the quantum communication system, Admiral Chin's response carried the same grim determination that had characterized humanity's response to the original Vexhai threat. Dr. Warren, implement expansion protocols immediately. If we're going to become the galaxy's apex predator species, we need to start hunting. The transformation was beginning. Within a year, the first human expansion fleets would launch toward distant star systems, carrying technology that represented the combined innovations of dozens of extinct civilizations and the adaptive potential that had made humanity the dominant species on Earth. The galaxy's elder powers were about to discover that they had underestimated the most dangerous quality any predator could possess: the ability to learn from every creature it hunted, becoming more dangerous with every successful kill. Humanity's age of galactic dominance was about to begin. 10 years after the 72-hour war, the galaxy had learned a new word: human. It was whispered in fear across 1,000 worlds, spoken with reverence in the underground resistance movements of oppressed civilizations, and analyzed with growing alarm in the vast computational networks of the Elder Powers. Admiral Sarah Chun, now Grand Admiral of the Terran Hegemony, stood on the command deck of the Apex Predator, flagship of humanity's galactic fleet. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, she could see the assembled might of what had once been dozens of separate civilizations. Vexhai bioships pulsing with enhanced human technology, crystalline Zephyrian vessels that sang in harmonies capable of shattering enemy morale, and sleek Nexary craft that existed partially outside normal space-time. But the most impressive sight was the newest addition to the fleet: ships that were purely human in design, incorporating the best innovations from every species humanity had encountered and improved upon. These vessels represented something unprecedented in galactic history, technology that surpassed anything the Elder Powers had developed in their billions of years of dominance. Status report. Chun commanded, her enhanced consciousness interfacing directly with the command systems of over 10,000 ships simultaneously. All systems optimal, Grand Admiral, replied Captain Martinez, formerly Lieutenant Commander Santos, now enhanced with biological modifications that incorporated the best features of 17 different species. The final phase of the integration is complete. We now have full control of everything within a 50,000 light-year radius of Earth. The transformation had been even more rapid than humanity's most optimistic projections. Each species they encountered had faced the same choice that had been offered to the Vexhai: join the human collective voluntarily and retain autonomy within the greater structure, or be forcibly absorbed and converted into resources for humanity's continued expansion. Most had chosen to join voluntarily once they understood what humanity offered: not just survival, but enhancement. Human genetic engineering, combined with technologies stolen from dozens of civilizations, could improve any species beyond their natural limitations. The Nexary had gained physical forms that could exist in normal space-time while retaining their quantum abilities. The crystalline Zephyrians had been given biological components that allowed them to interface directly with living technology. Even the proud Vexhai had accepted modifications that made them more efficient predators than they had ever been in their pure form. What about the Andromedans? Chen asked. Captain Martinez's expression darkened. "They're problematic, Grand Admiral. Our diplomatic envoys were returned as quantum static. Apparently, the Andromedan Collective considers our expansion to be entertaining but ultimately irrelevant to their interests." Through her neural interface, Chun accessed the intelligence reports on the Andromedan Collective, one of the 7 elder powers that controlled vast territories within the galaxy. Unlike the younger civilizations that humanity had encountered, the Andromedans had transcended traditional concepts of biology and technology. They existed as pure consciousness distributed across galactic-scale quantum networks, treating matter and energy as temporary inconveniences to be manipulated at will. "They're testing us," Chun realized. "Every elder power we've contacted has responded the same way. They're not threatened by our expansion because they don't consider us capable of becoming a real threat." It was a familiar pattern. The same underestimation that had doomed the Vexhai was being repeated by entities that had ruled the galaxy for eons. They saw humanity's rapid expansion and technological advancement as the behavior of a particularly energetic young species that would eventually exhaust itself against the natural limitations of galactic-scale civilization. They had no concept of what persistence hunting looked like on a cosmic scale. "Grand Admiral," came a new voice through the quantum communication system. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, now Director of Xenotechnological Development. "We've completed the analysis of the quantum resonance patterns from the galactic core. You need to see this immediately." The data Warren transmitted caused alarm protocols to activate across Chin's enhanced neural network. Deep space monitoring stations had detected massive quantum disturbances emanating from the galactic center, patterns that suggested something of unprecedented scale was beginning to stir. "The Devour protocols are activating," Warren continued, her voice tight with implications that made Chin's enhanced threat assessment systems issue critical warnings. Through her neural interface, Chin accessed the most classified intelligence humanity had acquired, record from the deepest archives of every elder civilization, describing entities that existed at the very center of the galaxy. The Devourers were older than the elder powers themselves, predators so advanced that they treated entire civilizations as food sources and elder powers as barely adequate entertainment. According to the records, the Devourers had been dormant for millions of years, content to allow younger species to develop and spread throughout the galaxy until they became interesting enough to consume. The quantum disturbances suggested that humanity's rapid expansion had finally attracted their attention. "How long until they arrive?" Chin asked. "Based on the quantum signatures, approximately 18 months, Warren replied. "Grand Admiral, these aren't entities that can be fought with conventional weapons or technology. They exist on scales that make galactic civilizations look like microorganisms. When they move, entire star systems simply cease to exist." Chin studied the tactical displays showing humanity's current territorial control. In 10 years, the human collective had absorbed or allied with over 300 distinct civilizations, creating a technological and biological synthesis that surpassed anything the galaxy had seen. But compared to entities that could manipulate the fundamental structure of reality itself, even humanity's enhanced capabilities seemed insignificant. Dr. Warren, implement Project Transcendence immediately. "Grand Admiral, the risks are acceptable compared to the alternative," Chen interrupted. "If we're going to face entities that exist beyond normal concepts of biology and technology, then we need to become something beyond normal concepts of biology and technology." Project Transcendence represented humanity's most ambitious undertaking. The systematic merger of consciousness across every species in their collective, creating a distributed intelligence that could exist simultaneously in normal space-time, quantum dimensions, and the spaces between reality that the elder powers inhabited. The project had been in development since humanity's first contact with quantum-based civilizations, incorporating consciousness transfer technology from the Nexari, distributed processing systems from the crystalline Zephyrians, and biological networking protocols perfected by the Vexhai. Combined with human innovation and the desperate creativity that came from facing extinction, it promised to create something unprecedented, a collective consciousness that maintained individual identity while accessing the combined knowledge and capabilities of hundreds of species. Initiate cascade protocols, Chun commanded, opening communication channels to every ship, station, and world under human control. Citizens of the Terran hegemony, we are about to face our greatest challenge. Entities older than our galaxy are awakening, drawn by our expansion and success. To survive what's coming, we must become something greater than the sum of our parts. The response was immediate and unanimous. Across hundreds of worlds, billions of beings began the transcendence process, their consciousnesses merging into a vast network that spanned galactic distances while maintaining the individual personalities and perspectives that had made each species unique. Chun felt the change as it happened, her enhanced awareness suddenly expanding to encompass not just her own thoughts but the combined experiences of every being in the human collective. She was simultaneously a human admiral planning for galactic war, a Vexi hunter analyzing predatory strategies, a Nexari quantum engineer manipulating probability itself, and countless other perspectives united in common purpose. For the first time in galactic history, persistence hunting was being attempted on a cosmic scale. Humanity would track the devourers across dimensions, learn from every encounter, adapt to every attack, and systematically acquire every advantage until they possessed the capabilities necessary to hunt entities that treated galaxies as hunting grounds. Transcendence complete, Warren reported, her voice now carrying harmonics that suggested consciousness operating across multiple dimensional frameworks simultaneously. Grand Admiral, we are no longer entirely human. We are no longer entirely anything. We have become something new. Through the collective consciousness, Chun could perceive the Devourer's approach as a vast disruption in the quantum foam that underlied reality. They were massive beyond comprehension, ancient beyond measure, and utterly certain of their dominance over all lesser forms of existence. They had never encountered a species that grew stronger with every defeat, more dangerous with every adaptation, more determined with every loss. They had never faced persistence hunters who viewed cosmic extinction as simply another challenge to overcome through patience, creativity, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Citizens of the galaxy, Chun broadcast, her message carried simultaneously through normal space, quantum dimensions, and the probability streams that connected all possible futures. You are about to witness the birth of the ultimate apex predator. For 4 billion years, life on Earth has been shaped by one simple principle: adapt or die. Today, we apply that principle on a galactic scale. The collective consciousness of the Terran hegemony began implementing strategies that incorporated the hunting techniques of every successful predator in known history, combined with technologies that bent the fundamental laws of physics to their will. They would track the devourers across dimensions, learn from their attacks, steal their capabilities, and systematically acquire every advantage until even entities that existed beyond normal reality became prey. Let them come, Chun continued, her awareness now spanning the space between galaxies while remaining focused on the immediate tactical situation. We are no longer the species that begged for mercy from the Vexi. We are no longer the civilization that hid in fear from elder powers. We are the apex predators of this galaxy, and we are about to prove that there is no such thing as an apex predator that cannot be hunted. In the depths of space, quantum disturbances mark the approach of entities that had ruled the cosmos since before the first stars formed. They came expecting to find another young civilization to consume, another brief entertainment in their eternal existence. Instead, they were about to encounter something unprecedented in the billion-year history of galactic civilization, a species that had spent 10 years systematically hunting and absorbing every predator they encountered, becoming stronger and more dangerous with each conquest. The age of the Devourers was ending. The age of humanity was about to begin. And in the vast network of consciousness that now spanned hundreds of worlds and dozens of species, a single thought echoed with the certainty that had driven human evolution since the first ape picked up a stick and decided to hunt something larger than itself. We are the hunters now. Asterisk.